Cézanne Visser, dubbed Advocate Barbie, is out of jail. She was released from the Pretoria Central Correctional Centre this morning after serving half of her 7-year prison term. She's now under house arrest. Visser was convicted of fraud, indecent assault and soliciting a 13-year-old to commit indecent acts in 2009. Joining me now is the clinic director at the Teddy Bear Clinic, Shaheda Omar. Afternoon to you, and thank you so much for joining us. So this may be legal and above board, but is it right?
Well, to begin with, I think it was a very lenient sentence. Unacceptable. Violation committed against any child is a gross violation. It's a misconduct and it needs to be treated more severely. So the release on parole is even a greater violation.
Under what conditions was she granted parole?
Well, that is what we question. Was she granted parole? Are we guaranteed that she's going to be appearing on the sex offenders register, the child protection register? And how are we going to ensure the safety of all children? Yes, she's only allowed to go to work and to church, but does that restrict her from having contact with any child, a child? What about that? I think it's important to understand that the global literature states that an offender, even after an offender, sexual offender, has received intervention or treatment, is likely to re-offend 2 or 3 years after the intervention. So how are we going to ensure the safety of children? Children are at risk and children are very vulnerable.
The parole board presumably would have taken all of these factors into account.
Indeed, they have probably taken things into account, and I do agree that everybody needs or requires a second chance in life. But in view of the acts that have been committed by Advocate Barbie, if you look at the pattern of behavior, the modus operandi, it was not a once-off incident or an isolated incident. It was not just one victim. It was several victims. It was the pattern, the duration, the frequency, the severity all indicates high risk factors, that she's a high risk.
Can organizations such as yourself or other enraged South Africans challenge this at the parole board?
Well, certainly I think a few of the organizations and our stakeholders and partners, civil society partners, are outraged at this and are willing to pursue this further, because our aim is to ensure the safety of children and promote the best interests of children.
I'm trying to understand the workings of the parole board in making such a decision. Does it not owe the South African public an answer? Does it not need to have been more transparent in telling us how it arrived at this decision?
Indeed, and those are the questions we're asking. Can they guarantee the safety of children? And they need to inform us if she is on the sex offenders register or the child protection register or both. And that can they ensure that she will not come into contact with any child? And of course, they need to also inform us on what grounds, what were the merits of their decision, because usually parole is usually only provided after a perpetrator or a convicted person has completed 2/3 of their sentence. So this is laughable. That, apart from being laughable, it's actually shocking and unacceptable that after 3 years she has now been granted parole, although we know it's under a maximum category of where it stipulates strict conditions, but still we need to know what those conditions are, where, what, who, how. We need to know all the details around that.
In the work that you have been doing over the years, is it your belief that sex offenders can ever be fully rehabilitated?
Thank you for asking that question. I would use the analogy of an alcoholic. Can an alcoholic ever be cured of their disorder? And therefore, I would say that an alcoholic can never be cured like a sex offender who has his deviant thoughts and fantasies. They're not going to be cured, and it's going to require strict monitoring, supervision, and continued therapy, and of course strict surveillance. So there are questions.
Correctional services have the capacity to do that?
And that is a question we ask.
Thank you so much for your time and for your input here. That was Shaheda Omar. She is the director at the Teddy Bear Clinic.
News that moves. eNCA.com.